All right, thank you so much for joining me. Um, Before we start, can you introduce yourself, say your name, what you do, where you're from?
Sure. Yeah, my name is Kian Ravaei. I'm a composer. I'm from LA and I'm currently living in New York City.
Nice. Okay, first question. What is the initial inspiration behind your composition pieces? And can you share any insights into your creative process, particularly how you begin a new composition?
A lot of my new pieces start from being inspired by other pieces that I love, especially I think a lot about what music I would want to listen to on my deathbed. And those are pieces that I revisit a lot when I'm starting a new piece. And I'll often try to evoke the same emotion that those pieces make me feel using my own notes. And I tend to go from there.
Can you share any piece that you are really into currently?
Another like piece of music by
Yeah,
like
yeah.
another
Another
composer.
composer.
I'm really into this piece by Michael Torkey called Last. It's an album actually for strings. It just came out yesterday. But he sent me a advanced copy um a couple months ago, and I've just been playing it on loop. It's super comforting. It's
Mhm.
very rare to find contemporary music that's as comforting as his music, I think.
Yeah, that's nice. Are there any of your pieces that you would like to share the key musical ideas or themes that you explore?
Sure. Yeah. So one thing that I explore in a lot of my music is Iranian classical music. My folks are Iranian immigrants, and I've been studying Iranian classical music for a few years. A couple years ago, I also started playing the setar, which is uh, it's like a long-necked lute.
Mhm.
And yeah, I have a piece called Family Photos that incorporates a lot of Iranian classical music. For that piece, I sort of took a few different modes or dasgas of Iranian classical music and also a few instrumental timbres and tried to adapt them to the string quartet.
Very interesting. How do you approach creating compositions that resonate across diverse audiences while still staying true to your artistic identity?
I don't think my music really does it for everybody. I don't think any music really does it for everybody. For me, certainly, there's no one composer that does it for me all of the time. So I don't really concern myself with I guess having like a global audience. But I do try to capture specific emotions or musical affects as deeply as I can, and I try to write stuff that resonates with me, and I hope that as a result it'll resonate with others.
So when you go about pieces, do you think solely about how it'll speak to like a certain group of people or purely yourself or in general, like a wide audience?
I'm thinking about writing a piece that will satisfy an audience, um, and I but in doing so, I think about the times that I've been an audience member and
Mhm.
I've been satisfied or dissatisfied. So I'm putting sort of myself in the audience's shoes and thinking, what would I want to hear in a concert?
That's good. Um, I feel like this goes into a different question, but for me, a lot of contemporary music I didn't understand at first. And my like repertoire is limited to about five pieces, two of which are like orchestra arrangements. But a lot of music students that I know don't know how to start or how to understand modern classical music. So do you have any tips specifically for those kinds of people?
That's awesome. That was me. I didn't really get into this until I was 18 or 19, actually. Before that, I was always really into EDM, which, if you think about it, is another kind of instrumental music. And then I got into jazz, and I feel like jazz was kind of my gateway drug into classical music. But one of the things that I remember really helping me was understanding the form of classical pieces. Specifically, I remember watching some like YouTube lectures on sonata form, and that really helped me like get a grasp of regular classical music, common practice era classical music, whatever you want to call it. Um, and having like an understanding of the tradition, I feel like also helped me understand how composers are taking that tradition to a new place.
Mhm. Did you have any classical exposure prior to getting into your compositions?
I started playing piano when I was 4, and yeah, I played a lot of classical like repertoire, but also, like High School Musical and stuff like that. But I never really liked practicing. The repertoire didn't really resonate with me. And when I started studying composition in college, I didn't know that it was like composition with a parenthesized classical in front of it. I thought I was going to learn principles that would enable me to compose in any style. So it's been a long road to arriving at quote unquote classical music, and I think a lot of the stuff I do is cross genre in some sense.
Mhm. So the genres that you work with are kind
Uh,
of classical, Iranian, and then EDM, you said?
yeah, I would say so. I do a lot of EDM crossover stuff too.
Mhm. All right. Are there any new directions or unexplored areas within music composition that you're particularly excited to delve into in your future projects?
Yeah, I'm working on a piece right now for the American Composers Orchestra that hopefully will synthesize Persian music, EDM, and Western classical music in a way where each of these traditions is in dialogue with one another and feeds off of each other,
Mhm.
and is not kind of contrived. I'm still in the process of figuring all of that out, but I'm really interested in this like idea of hybridity and how to bring different musical styles together. And I think I'm gonna continue expanding that for the rest of my life.
Do you see any other genres that you would like to incorporate into your music in the future?
Yes. Um, so I'm getting like increasingly into metal. So I think it, and I actually know there's quite a few composers who like have been doing metal crossover for a long time, but there's some like really intricate rhythmic stuff in there. So it would be cool to bring that influence into my music too.
Do you have a favorite metal artist?
Um, Not yet, to be honest. I've just been listening to random stuff here and there.
Fair. All right. In your opinion, what are the greatest challenges faced by contemporary composers and performers within the classical musical industry today?
Um, it's it you know I think one of the biggest challenges is that contemporary music is really tied to institutions, and there's a culture of elitism. So it's hard for a composer who hasn't been affiliated with these institutions. For example, like Ivy League schools, Juilliard, where I'm a student now, to get a start, especially if you're starting maybe after you've already gone through college. And I think that's a shame because isn't the whole point of art to capture as many human viewpoints as possible? So why are we limiting the people who have an audience to the people who have gone through this very regimented higher education and have learned to write music that adheres to a specific set of values?
Yeah, I feel like that ties into the question I asked earlier, where a lot of music students are, I wouldn't say afraid, but are kind of against going into contemporary music, and they tend to stick to classical in general. So do you have anything that would maybe convince those kinds of people to expand their mindset on contemporary music?
You know, I've had like some teachers over the years tell me that what I write is like too cookie cutter. Other people tell me it's like too cliche. So I'm not really one to like look at somebody else's music and say like, "Oh, it's too classical, it's already been done." Because ultimately, I think if it comes from the heart, if it's sincere, it has a lot of value. And I would rather hear something that's a sincere expression than someone trying to be adventurous for its own sake. So my advice is just keep writing what's on your heart, and maybe one day that will include contemporary styles and maybe it won't. But if there's a modern day Mozart out there who can write Mozart symphonies, 42 through 100, I want to hear that.
Yeah. All right. Are there any emerging trends or movements that you believe will impact the contemporary genre positively?
I think there's a greater embrace of electronics. A lot of halls, recital halls, are outfitted to have works with electronics, and a lot of composers that I know are experimenting with video and MIDI and various technologies of that sort. And I think electronics has been around for a long time now. I mean, since the 60s and before. But as we increasingly like move into a cyborg world, I think creating music that incorporates technology will become more interesting and more relevant to what it means to be human in the 21st century.
Yeah. Do you think this will help you incorporate your EDM styles into your music continuing on?
Yeah, I sure hope so.
Um, and then how can contemporary classical music be made more accessible to a wider audience? Are there any strategies or initiatives you believe would be effective in generalizing its appeal?
I think telling the stories around contemporary pieces really helps audiences connect with the music. And I feel like the pieces I've written that have been the most successful are often the ones with the most compelling story. I don't think it's the pieces that I like the best musically, um, because ultimately, when there's some kind of narrative to latch onto, and I don't mean like a program for the piece, but it could even be a story about the composer. Even if you just know a little bit about the composer's biographical story, then I think that helps a lot in putting a face behind these pieces that are often kind of esoteric sounding.
This is a question more specifically about one of your pieces, but for your quartet, The Little Things,
Mm.
when you went about using an Emily Dickinson like series of poems, did you see the poems first and then go about writing music that matched them, or ma made music and then matched them to the poems?
That's a great question. I did identify the poems first, but I also didn't start with the idea of Emily Dickinson poetry. I started with a formal idea, which is a set of 7 miniature tone poems for string quartet. And then I was thinking of what poet could work to serve this idea. And I was deciding between Emily Dickinson and Walt Whitman. And ultimately I chose Dickinson, but maybe in the future I'll write a Whitman piece too.
Mhm. This one goes back into the technology kind of question, but what is your vision for the future of music composition with AI technology or any kind of technology in general? What are the pros and cons in your opinion?
Well, sometimes people ask me, do I think AI is going to replace my job? And I don't really think so, because what I do is art music, and nobody's going to be going to a museum to see AI slop. I think AI is going to replace things like film music, but concert music is more like going to a museum versus having a piece of art for some functional purpose. Um, so that being said, I do think there are a lot of interesting things happening with AI and have been happening kind of before the advent of LLMs, including like George Lewis has a piece with like a machine learning accompanist. And I can think of some other composers who have AI pieces. So I think it's a great representation of what it means to be human in like our world that's moving toward a state of being cyborg.
Good point. Do you think you'll at any point try to use AI for your compositions?
I don't think so. I don't. I really like um choosing my own notes, and that is a thing that feels personal to me. And I think I can express what it means to be human in the modern day through other means.
Mhm. All right. This question is more for classical sake, but are there any outreach programs or educational initiatives that you find particularly promising in promoting contemporary classical music to diverse audiences?
Well, I can at least shout out a summer festival that some of my colleagues started, and that I was a resident composer at last year, and I will be this year. And we had a call for scores last year, and we're going to have another call for scores this year. It's the Tenby International Music Festival, and we select a couple composers, and we perform their music in Wales, in the UK, and it becomes a important portfolio item for composers. And we also get to share contemporary music with kind of a local community that doesn't really have a lot of access to it. So this isn't like a global super high impact education scheme by any means, but hopefully it's doing something good for the people who come into contact with it.
Mhm. I know for me, I first found one of your pieces actually on Instagram. But do you think that when you try to get your pieces out to an audience, do you think it's better to use social media or going into an actual hall and playing your music there?
I think both are great. Anything that puts your music in front of people who might love it. So I think it's really awesome that you found my music on social media, because the whole point of me putting my music on there is that hopefully there's a Kian's music filled, sorry, how should I say this? There's a Kian's music sized gap in somebody's heart that it can fill. And I wanted to reach those people. It's not going to be a lot of people, but it will be some people. So that to me is the whole purpose of sharing music as widely as possible.
Mhm. Do you have any composers in mind who you think are underrepresented and should be remembered?
Yes, actually. Have you ever heard of Marie Yale?
No, I have not.
Marie Yale was a late Romantic French composer. She was married to a very famous pianist named Alfred Yale, who I think premiered a Brahms uh, piano concerto. But her work has been overshadowed by him, and it's some of the best music I've heard from the late Romantic era, honestly. Her cello concerto, in particular, in A major, just unbelievable. And she has a large body of piano repertoire because she was also quite famous as a piano pedagogue. So at Juilliard, I took a class called, I forget what it was called, but it was about creating a critical edition of a score. So I created a new critical edition of one of her scores that hasn't been published, and I uploaded it to IMSLP. It's called Sphinx, so everybody can download it and be exposed to some of Marie Yale's music. And I hope more and more people start to play it.
Do you have any of your own peers you think are underrepresented as well?
Ooh, oh, there's too many to name. I really could spend like an hour going down the list, so that's a difficult one.
Do you perchance have a top that you would say in this moment?
Um, well, I'll shout out one of my mentors, who's Derek Sky. Derek is doing transcultural music of the highest caliber, and he's combining a lot of different musical styles, including Hindustani classical, West African, Persian, like music from the Baltics, Irish music, American music. All these different things go into his music, and they create something that evokes all of those traditions while being something totally its own. And so he's been a big inspiration to me as I try to do something similar in my works.
That's amazing. I know for me, my past viol teacher actually encouraged me to incorporate music from my own culture, being Ghanaian. But I found
Cool.
it really difficult to do it since obviously I hadn't composed anything in the past, and I didn't understand how to incorporate those themes into like a classical piece. It was Hofmeister viol concerto, the cadenza. So
Oh, nice.
how do you go about incorporating your Iranian identity into your compositions?
I felt the same way. Like people would tell me, "Oh, you should do Persian music." And I was like, I'm Persian, but I didn't really like grow up with Persian classical music. There was some like Persian pop music playing around the house, but that's it. And so, but that's something on its own, I realized. Like that like Persian melodies are inside of me in a way that they aren't for somebody who didn't grow up with the sounds of Persian pop music, which does have a lot of influence from Persian classical music. But when I started to actually study the music theory behind Persian classical music, I had to start like an absolute beginner. And it was actually very hard to kind of distance myself from my Western training and look at Persian music on its own terms. So I would say like if that's something that you feel passionately about, just go at it like you're a complete beginner.
So how different do you think Persian classical is from Western classical?
Oh, it's quite different. I mean, they've had completely different historical trajectories. And a lot of Persian classical music is highly improvisatory in nature. Western classical music used to be improvisatory, but now basically not. And also, Persian music has microtones. Western music historically, not really, but in the modern era, it's becoming more common. So it's an opportunity to blend the worlds.
So do you go about using microtonal music into your compositions when you try to incorporate Persian classical?
Yeah, I do. At first, I didn't. I just like rounded the notes to the nearest 12 tempered or 12 tone equal temperament scale. Um, but I realized to be like really authentic to the Persian music, I can use the microtones, even if it's pushing the musicians a little bit. I think it's more important to be true to the style. And also on the topic of like authenticity, the deeper I go into Persian music, the like more skeptical I become about what authenticity really is, because there are so many different authenticities, and everybody in Persian music disagrees about what is authentic. So I think actually it's a little bit of an overblown term, especially for anybody doing some kind of like transcultural music in the Western classical sphere. Um, I think probably like respect is like the more important thing than authenticity.
So when you go about respecting Persian classical into your compositions, do you think of it in a way of I'm going to use this certain theme into my composition, or do you think of it as I'm going to use this idea or this type of, I don't know, like a certain scale or something like that?
Um, so to kind of go full circle, I think of like specific pieces of music that I've heard. Um, for example, Hossein Alizadeh is one of like the master improvisers on the sitar. And whenever I write anything that's of an improvisatory nature, I think of his playing specifically. Or I think of Shajarian, who's one of the most revered Iranian classical vocalists. Um, so I start with that, and then I figure out what are the modes or the dasgas and the gushas that they were singing or playing, and how could I potentially crisscross that with some Western harmonies.
Yeah. All right, this question is more for me, but do you have any solo viola pieces that I should look out for?
I don't have any solo viola pieces, but I have a viola duo, and it's called Navazi. It has actually, it's kind of the only piece I've written that basically has no Western classical influence. It's just straight notated Persian improvisations.
That's something I'll look at it.
Yeah, thanks for asking.